You close your eyes in prayer, but a knock shatters the silence. Not on a door, but on a window, high on the second floor. What follows is a sound that should be impossible. Welcome to the horror sector. Tonight, we cross a threshold into 5 true accounts of the inexplicable. A brother's desperate lie for survival, a prayer circle besieged by a phantom, and generational hauntings where fear is passed down like a family name. Prepare yourself. The veil is thin here. Listen closely, but do not open your eyes until it's over. I remember a lot from when my brother and I were little. He was 2 years older than me, but tall for his age, very tall. And I was always sickly and weak, so when we were kids, it seemed like there was a 5-year age gap between us. My parents would leave us alone because they both went to work. Back then, they were trying to start a business, and they were gone from sunrise to sunset. They dropped us off at school at 7 o'clock, and they got home after 7 o'clock at night. At school, my brother waited for me outside my classroom every day. It was strange because I never ran into him at recess, but he was always there at the door when I came out. I don't know how he managed to leave before me and come wait for me, but he was always there. But I liked that. I knew I could trust him. I could always trust him. We walked home with his friends. It wasn't the safest neighborhood, but since we were all together, nobody bothered us. The only time a man who lived in a vacant lot thought of asking us for money in a somewhat violent way, he ended up giving a good beating to those 5 6th grade boys, the toughest in the school. That was the first time I saw my brother fight, really fight like that, as if his life depended on it. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be the last, and I want to say that he was a brave person. That's why what I'm about to tell you happened the way it did. We were at home. It was almost 10 o'clock. At that time, Doña Ofelia, a very good friend of my mother's, would always come by to bring us something for dinner. But on that occasion, we only received a call. She was letting us know she would be late, that we should eat something in the meantime, anything at all, and that she would be there as soon as she could. My brother started looking for something to make, but there was nothing. Those were difficult times when the refrigerator was almost always empty, when everything went to the family business. Doña Ofelia didn't charge my parents anything for checking on us every day, for giving us dinner. She also did it out of affection for us, so there was no way we could complain that he couldn't do us that favor that night. But there was nothing, absolutely nothing for dinner, and we were starving. I turned around from the living room and saw my brother searching the top of the cupboard, standing on his tiptoes, to see if there was anything hidden there. The front door, between the living room and the kitchen, slammed open, and we saw a woman run into our house crying and go straight to my parents' room. I didn't know what to do. I just stood up, and my brother jumped up from his chair to look out from that passageway between the living room and the kitchen toward the room. Then he looked back out at the street. Something caught his eye, and he darted to lock the door. I froze, terrified, and he grabbed me and pulled me into our room. As soon as we got inside, we heard someone kicking the front door really hard. It sounded like they were going to break it down. On the other side of the wall, we could hear the woman crying, terrified, hiding in my parents' room. And suddenly, it was clear that the door had come crashing down, that whoever was there, whoever had been following her, had gotten inside. I started to cry. My brother pushed me toward the closet, sat me down at the back, and piled things on top of me to hide me. He gave me a belt to lock the doors from the inside, jamming the 2 knobs. He told me to go around them and pull hard if I heard someone enter the room. I asked him what he was going to do. I begged him to stay hidden with me, please not to come out, not to stop that man. He was brave, but what we could hear outside was a completely furious, grown man. He told me to calm down, that he would climb out the window, that he would run to find Doña Ofelia's husband. He told the neighbors to lock the door, and that under no circumstances should I open the door before he returned. I heard him open the window. I heard him jump out and let out a cry of pain as he landed. I heard him run. And at that moment, the crying behind me in my parents' room suddenly stopped in an instant. The voices of that man who seemed to have entered the house, destroying everything, throwing everything in his path until he reached the room, also stopped. He, too, suddenly fell in an instant. The bedroom door opened slowly. Someone approached the door. They knocked, but I stayed silent. I held my breath so no one would know I was there. "It's me. Open up." I heard my brother's voice, but he had just left. He had said he was going to run to Doña Ofelia's house, and that was on the street behind us. He couldn't be there. I tried to open it and pulled the belt hard, squeezing as tightly as I could. "I promise it's me. Open up. I want to show you something." I don't know why, but I couldn't take it anymore. He was about to open the door, even though I was trying to stop him, so I just gave up. I unbuckled the lock, slowly opened it. "I told you it was me, you idiot. Come on, come see." It was my brother, smiling, but with a different nervous smile. I went out with him, and he showed me the hallway. Everything was in order. The front door was in perfect condition. Then we went to check my parents' room, and there was no one there, not a single sign that anyone had been in there. It was as if the woman and whatever was following her had just vanished. No one came in, he told me. I tried to tell him that wasn't true, that we had both seen her go in. That wasn't a ghost. We saw a woman run in screaming, a real woman. We heard her hide in my parents' room. That woman had left the front door open. My brother had closed it for her afterward. I know, but nobody came in, my brother replied sadly. I asked him what he had seen outside when he peeked out, when he quickly closed the door and locked it. He just shook his head, as if he hadn't seen anything or as if he didn't want to say. When Doña Ofelia arrived with the dinner a few minutes later, the first thing I did was tell her what had just happened. She looked at me somewhat puzzled, glancing at my brother as if to get his confirmation that what I was saying was true. And then she told my mother. From then on, the two of them prayed every night in my parents' room for 9 days. Nothing strange ever happened in that house again. My parents are no longer here to ask them about this story. Neither is my brother. I never found out what he saw. I couldn't ask if they knew if anything else had happened in that house or what I saw. I still think that maybe it was a moment frozen in time, repeating itself, perhaps from the past, perhaps from something that hasn't happened yet. I hope it's the former. This happened 6 years ago. I was 17, and at that time I was in the church youth group. I'd been there for a while, and they'd invited me to be part of the coordinating team. There were about 10 of us, all roughly the same age. The meetings were on Friday nights. We met in a room on the second floor of a building next to the church. To get in, you had to go through a very heavy metal door that was on the side of this building. Then we crossed 2 rooms, one with an old piano and the other with an electric organ. That second room led to a larger one with a small stage and a red door on one side. From there, you went up some stairs that led to the room where we met. If you continued up, there was a hallway with several more rooms where they held catechism classes. It was a huge place, like a labyrinth. The room where we held our meetings had 2 windows, one overlooking the storage room and the other overlooking one of the catechism rooms. I'm explaining all this so you can picture it better, because later on, those details do matter. That night, all 10 of us in the group were there. Only the adult coordinator, Victor, was missing. Since we all got out of school late, meetings were almost always at 8. While we waited for Victor, we were chatting, killing time. After about 10 minutes late, he arrived. We got out one of our usual folding tables and started the meeting. Everything was completely normal for the next 2 hours. It was almost 11, and as usual, Victor offered to walk us all home. But then someone knocked on the window overlooking the warehouse, as if they wanted us to open it. It was a window where no one could stand because the warehouse had a high ceiling. That window was on the second floor. We all turned around automatically, but no one said anything. No one dared, even though it was an almost imperceptible knock. It had happened. Victor calmly remarked, "We need to hurry. They want us to leave." We tried to continue the meeting, though we were all left wondering. And just as we were about to finish, they knocked again. But this time it was louder, more insistent. Victor got up from his chair and said, "Okay, let's go, but please, hold hands. Let's say a prayer before we leave." We all stood together. It was already a custom to close our eyes while we prayed. But this time, just before we started, Victor said something else. "I'm going to ask you something, guys. Close your eyes and don't open them until I tell you to. Let's close them." Nobody said anything, but it was clear that everyone was thinking the same thing. Something very, very strange was happening. We stood up and began to pray. Victor had barely begun speaking when I heard the door to the hall open, a heavy door that creaked horribly as it moved. There was no mistaking that sound. I felt Daniela, who was to my left, and Miguel, who was to my right, squeeze my hands tightly, and then I knew I wasn't the only one who had heard it, that I wasn't imagining it, that it wasn't their doing. A moment later, the door closed. It closed with a force that made me jump, and at that moment Victor raised his voice and said louder, "Okay, don't open your eyes until I tell you, please." This time her tone was different. It wasn't part of the prayer. It was like when you're being scolded for something serious. She continued praying, but I couldn't think of anything anymore. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could. The atmosphere changed. It felt strange in a way I'd never felt there, much less there. It was as if something was in the room with us. I don't know, it was a horrible tension. I started to hear footsteps, soft but distinct footsteps in the room with us, like someone wearing heels. Tap, 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 one after the other, circling us. They were walking slowly, as if they wanted to make sure we all heard them. The footsteps moved around us. I could feel them getting closer to each of us. It was as if someone were walking right behind me, behind us. I strained to hear something, a laugh, as if they were watching us from somewhere, as if they were laughing at us, not at a joke, not at something funny. They were laughing at us as if we were fools. Daniel and Miguel were squeezing my hands tighter and tighter. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. I could feel them trembling. And then I felt something else. Something was pressing on my shoulders, as if someone were trying to push me to the ground. My back started to hurt as if something were on top of me, and right after that, I felt a breath. It was on my face. It was heavy, ragged, and I felt like there was something in front of me, very close. I didn't dare open my eyes. Suddenly, Fernando, another member of the group, shouted, his voice cracking. And then someone told us to form a single file, to hold onto each other's shirts for support, and not to let go. And so, blindly, we made our way to the entrance hall. When we reached the exit door, Fernando tried to open it, but he couldn't. It's locked. Victor has the key. And that's when someone asked where Victor was. Someone else replied that he had stayed upstairs. We remained silent. No one said anything. A single note from the organ sounded. Just one. It was a dry, wooden sound, but it played. We all went inside. Panic. We started yelling at Victor to hurry, and a few seconds later he came running downstairs with his cell phone light on. He opened the door, and we dashed out to the nearby plaza. We lay there, literally lying there, trembling. Some were crying, wondering what had happened. Others, like me, didn't say a word. Nobody knew what to say. Victor tried to calm us down, but there was no way to explain what had just happened. The next day, we had to go back for our things. We went upstairs fearfully, as if expecting to find something or someone. But what was there was just as strange, even though I was alone. Everything was a mess, folders torn to shreds, papers scattered on the floor, backpacks open, notebooks ripped out. It looked like someone had been there all night rummaging through our things. Victor just looked at us and said that whenever someone sincerely tries to do good, they run the risk of evil trying to creep in. I never went to another meeting in that room again. I couldn't. And unlike many of the stories told here, where people go over a paranormal event again and again, to this day, no one else in the group has spoken about it, about what happened to us. It's as if we want to pretend it never happened. The stories of my family. The Olgans have lived through strange things for generations. Some stories have been passed down orally among us, as in every family. Others we experienced ourselves, and although sometimes it's hard to talk about them, we can't deny them, because fear stays with you and is inherited. Today, I want to tell you about 3 of those experiences. They're just the beginning, but they all happened in the same house, my grandparents' house. And the first one happened when I was just a little boy. You see, I was about 3 years old when it happened. I was just starting to speak properly. Perhaps that's why it's one of my earliest memories. And even so, I remember many parts of what I'm going to tell you clearly. The rest, I remember through what my family told me. That house was enormous and was always full of people, noise, birds, but also something else, something that was very clearly felt. We have a store out front and a shrine in the garage. Entering the house was the living room. To the left, the stairs to the right, and a reclining chair at the top, the kitchen, the dining room, the bedrooms, and a long hallway that led to the patio full of bird cages. During the day, everything seemed perfectly normal, but at night that hallway had something about it that made even the adults walk quickly. One of those nights I was alone upstairs watching cartoons when they say I suddenly started yelling, "It's my turn, give it to me." My cousin, who's in middle school, came upstairs to see what was going on. She says she found me crying, angry, arguing with someone she couldn't see. I told her the boy didn't want to give me the TV remote that he had hidden under the bed. My cousin, very scared, checked, but there was no one there. She just turned off the TV and we went downstairs. However, it wasn't the only time I mentioned this boy. It wasn't the only time I saw him. Another night I was sitting on the stairs watching TV with my grandfather. He got up to tend to the store and left me alone. And I remember this very well. When he left, I felt a hand on my back, small, light, and cold, very cold. That sensation, the small hand on my back, is still vivid in my memory. I turned around, quite frightened, but there was no one there. Before I could call out to my grandfather, a ball began rolling down the stairs on its own from upstairs. A ball that my grandfather had bought me just that day came down step by step until it reached my feet, as if someone had thrown it to me to play with. In time, we learned that it wasn't just my childhood imagination. My grandmother even said that sometimes she saw him very clearly, very distinctly, that what was there was a boy in jeans and a plaid shirt, that this boy had lived there for many, many years. And what I've just told you, of course, was only the beginning of what we experienced with him. Over time, we understood that this boy never left. No matter how long we stopped seeing him, even for years, he never left. He would come back. We would see him out of the corner of our eyes. We would hear him running down the hall. He lived there, and although at first it only seemed wanting to play, that presence began to feel increasingly clear. Until one afternoon, without warning, the fear became close, too close. I was in elementary school, and my cousin and I were huge WWE fans. One afternoon, like many others, we went up to the room where we watched the wrestling matches. There were 2 beds there, a single and a bunk bed. And when we went in, everything seemed normal until we plugged in the extension cord to turn on the TV. As soon as we made contact, I cried out, and at that moment, the blanket that was on the bed, a black and blue blanket with a tiger print, caught fire. But in seconds, the power went out throughout the house. My cousin ran out, and I followed him. My aunts and uncles started coming up from the patio with buckets of water, and I could only watch from the stairs. In shock, the second floor filled with smoke in an instant. I can't even begin to explain how quickly the second floor was completely engulfed in smoke, so thick we couldn't see anything. When they finally managed to put out the fire, they started screaming. "The children! Where were they? Are the children there? Where are they?" My cousin yelled from the stairs, "I've got one!" And he grabbed my hand and we started running downstairs. My Aunt Susanna screamed from upstairs. She said she saw one through the smoke, that he was there. She followed him down the hallway looking scared, and he kept slipping away until she finally managed to grab his hand, pulling him along without being able to see him. "Come down, Susanna. They're both here," my grandfather shouted from downstairs. My aunt stopped. She let go of the boy's hand, which she had grabbed without looking. Through the smoke, she couldn't see anyone else. Through the smoke, she realized there was no one else there. The poor thing ran downstairs, I remember, and she couldn't go back upstairs alone that night. She wasn't the only one who saw a third child running through the smoke, but no one could explain who else was there. And that night, I think more because of the child's fright than the fire itself, nobody could sleep. Fear had already settled in the house. Even as the days passed, nobody felt the same anymore. We couldn't go upstairs alone. Nobody liked being in silence. The atmosphere was very strange. I would dare say it was as if something had been opened up. This happened when I was in 6th grade, which is why I think I remember it more than all the previous stories. That night, my mom was at my grandparents' house with my aunts and uncles, playing cards and drinking some beer. It was already late when we decided to leave. I remember clearly that the moment we stepped outside, something felt off. I felt as if we shouldn't be leaving. Nothing had happened yet, but something was wrong. You could feel it. We were in the car, my mom driving, me in the passenger seat, and my brother asleep in the back. The rain was constant and heavy. It rained so much that one of the city's rivers overflowed. When we got to the intersection, we simply couldn't cross it. The water was already covering the road. We had to go back to my grandparents' house. It was as if we had to spend the night there. And at the house, my aunts and uncles went upstairs to continue playing in one of the rooms. In the living room, they had put a couple of mattresses together for my brother, my cousins, and me to lie down on. That was the only place we all fit. That's why they left us in the living room and turned off the light. I was sound asleep when it all started. My aunt and uncle and my cousin Chelly heard someone crying upstairs. They thought it was one of us. Chelly got up, went downstairs, and saw something on the mattress. She saw a child sitting on it, completely covered by a blanket. Only his silhouette was visible. But the blanket was so thin that it was perfectly clear that it was a small child underneath it. The figure turned toward her. "Mom." The figure lay down, but when my cousin lifted the blanket, she realized there was no one underneath, no one there. She went upstairs, very frightened. After that, all the adults brought down more mattresses and all settled down in the living room to sleep together with the light on. Although they told my cousin that she must have imagined it, everyone was uneasy. In the early morning, when the rain calmed down, the dogs began to bark, in the street, first far away, then getting closer and closer to us, as if something were approaching. Then came the scream, first soft, as if carried by the wind, then louder, clearer. That I heard. That's when I woke up. A scream appeared nearby, but when it receded, you could make out something. Words lost in the wind. Maybe it was just crying, or maybe she was saying something, especially when she was close. The crying was so deep it penetrated my chest. I could feel it in my bones. It wasn't of this world. I pretended to be asleep. I didn't dare move until someone murmured, "It's La Llorona." Oh, I felt my blood run cold. She's always terrified me. One of my uncles said that the gates of hell were open that night, that spirits walked among us. I don't know if that's true, but it was one of the longest nights of my life. The next day, we pretended not to have heard anything, but I still remember the fear, as if it happened yesterday. The stories have ended, but the echoes remain. A child's hand on a staircase, a final, desperate prayer in a dark room, a voice at the closet door that shouldn't be there. These moments linger in the silence after the telling. Did they ever truly leave? This has been the horror sector. Remember, the most familiar spaces hold the deepest shadows, and what we inherit isn't always a memory. Sometimes it's a presence. Stay aware of the quiet. Stay with us, because in the dark, something is always waiting for the lights to go out.